All right, picture this. America is at war, except it's not World War III, and we have no allies reaching out to help because we've abandoned NATO. The National Guard is patrolling big cities, blue cities in particular, doing things like rounding up the homeless. Kids are once again separated from their parents in mass deportations. Everything is more expensive, much worse than it is now, thanks to new taxes on foreign goods. The air you breathe is heavy, and it hurts your lungs because we've abandoned all efforts to curtail fossil fuel emissions while we drill. Disinformation has effectively wiped out the remnants of real journalism. The U.S. Constitution has been chewed up and spat out. Donald Trump is our president again. This is not an exaggeration. It is not fear-mongering, nor is it a series of my assumptions. That picture I just painted is based on what Donald Trump has already done, has tried to do, or has openly promised to do with a second term as the leader of this nation. We do not have to imagine a world like this. We just have to believe Trump. Take him at his word when he says the quiet parts out loud. Let's start with climate change. If Donald Trump is president again, he will roll back any of the progress made by the Biden administration. He's made it clear he plans to, quote, drill, baby, drill on his first day in office. On the campaign trail, Trump has identified boosting oil and gas output as his main priority. Trump's advisors and allies have said that the clean initiatives in Biden's crowning achievement, the Inflation Reduction Act, are the first on the chopping block, specifically the bill's support of electric vehicles. And based on the fact that while in office, Trump pulled the U.S. out of the Paris Climate Accords, safe to say he'd likely do it again. On immigration, just this week, while visiting the U.S.-Mexico border, Trump said he would use local police to implement his plan for mass deportations, something that is illegal under current law. He vowed to launch the, quote, largest deportation operation in American history if reelected. In a CNN town hall last May, Trump did not rule out reviving his family separation policy, in which migrant children were separated from their parents and many of them put in cages. And of course, he will want to try and build that wall again. Donald Trump has said he will not only revive his Muslim travel ban, but expand it to, quote, keep radical Islamic terrorists out of the country. And if you're unhappy with how the Israel-Gaza situation is currently being handled, which is valid, here's what Donald Trump plans to do. In the wake of the Hamas attack on Israel, Trump called for, quote, strong ideological screening for all immigrants coming into the country. He'd bar any potential refugees from Gaza, saying, quote, we aren't bringing in anyone from Gaza, Syria, Somalia, Yemen, or Libya, or anywhere else that threatens our security. And let's not forget the damage Trump has already done to this conflict. In 2017, he reversed decades of U.S. policy and formally recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Anger erupted amongst Palestinians and the Arab world. Protests and deadly confrontations broke out in Gaza and the West Bank. Jerusalem is home to Muslim, Jewish, and Christian holy sites and is bitterly contested between the Israelis and the Palestinians. That move needlessly stirred yet more conflict in an already volatile region. Back home, Trump plans to crack down on crime by sending the National Guard into big cities. In a recent speech in Iowa, Trump said when he was president, he considered but ultimately held back from deploying the military to, quote, crime dens like Chicago and New York City. He said next time around, he won't have the same restraint. On inflation, Trump has floated the idea of a 10% universal baseline tariff on foreign goods imported into the United States. Experts say that inflation would spike, so if you think things cost a lot now, just wait. Not to mention that a trade war would likely ensue. Speaking of war and global instability, you can bet Donald Trump will reevaluate America's position in NATO, if not abandon it altogether. Trump has long undermined the greatest military alliance in the history of the world, the one that caused foreign soldiers to fight and die for America after the attacks on 9/11. In February, Trump said he would encourage Russia to, quote, do whatever the hell they want to another NATO ally that is not contributing enough defense spending. Donald Trump will weaponize the Department of Justice to go after his political enemies. He said it over and over and over again. Retribution for those who have wronged him. He's told wild, screaming crowds of supporters that he will direct the DOJ to investigate, quote, every Marxist prosecutor in America. He's vowed to root out the, quote, radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country, end quote. Live like vermin. Just last week, he told a crowd at CPAC that his re-election would be Liberation Day for his supporters and Judgment Day for his enemies. All of this is sick and twisted, but here's the one that gets me the most. In 2022, in yet another screed about fictitious election fraud, Trump posted on Truth Social saying in part, quote, "A massive fraud of this type and magnitude allows for the termination of all rules, regulations, and articles, even those found in the Constitution." Even those found in the Constitution. Trump later said he never suggested terminating the Constitution, a complete denial of his own social media post, which is still online. What more can we expect from a man who openly admitted that he plans to be a dictator on day one of a potential second presidency? And let me be clear, everything that I just laid out, all of the things that Donald Trump has promised to do as president, that doesn't even scratch the surface. David Frum writes in an Atlantic piece titled "The Danger Ahead," quote, "In his first term, Trump's corruption and brutality were mitigated by his ignorance and his laziness. In a second, Trump would arrive with a much better understanding of the system's vulnerabilities, more willing enablers in tow, and a much more focused agenda of retaliation against his adversaries and impunity for himself." When people wonder what another Trump term might hold, their minds underestimate the chaos that would lie ahead.